welcome back. Once again, I am Douglas Grummins, and this is the continued reading of the book 10,000 Waves, Chapter 5, Part 2. We picked up where I left off skydiving, learning to skydive, and we now will get back into the work. Being a newly certified skydiver is an awkward position. You can free fall and fly your canopy, but you really don't know anything, and nobody really wants to jump with you until you learn how to fly proficiently. So for about 30 jumps, you're on your own. Except for the pretty girl jumpers, every now and then another fun jumper would invite you on a jump. After 50 jumps, you just start to pay your dues. Around 100 jumps is when my rigger started calling me a sky god, and that's what they call experienced skydivers. Skydiving is dangerous, and it can kill you. I have said goodbye to many who have lost their lives skydiving. Still, to me, it is one of the greatest spiritual moments one can ever experience. Another beautiful thing I love about skydiving is that the experience never gets old or jaded. Every person that gets on that plane knows and accepts that their life could be over very shortly, and that feeling never goes away. Bringing everything together using your awareness will bring a ray of light into whatever you are doing. Then you will know whether you are holding a rock in your hands or a beautiful diamond. People go on through life discarding their actions as just a waste of time. Before you know it, your life has passed you by, and all the diamonds have been tossed, and you are left with one last diamond. Without awareness, you might unknowingly throw that diamond away too. It takes a subtle eye to see the value of your actions. By bringing meditation into your life, a ray of awareness will enter your being. Someone else might possess some level of awareness in them and tell you that you are holding a bag of diamonds. The problem that comes up is that his diamonds might not be your diamonds. You need eyes of your own to see the truth, or to see the true worth of the stones that you were given. A part of my job at the time was to visit elderly retirement communities. After just a few visits, I became aware of something beautiful. The most beautiful thing that I ever seen in these facilities was the joy in the faces of the residents who I could see that lived a full life. Even though they were close to death, nothing could take away the joy in their faces, not even death. The ugliest thing I saw was a resident who did not have that joy. They threw away all their diamonds. None of their family members wanted to visit them, and they made everyone around them miserable. Life was coming to an end, and they did not learn how to live, and there was no richness in their soul. Another good thing about living on the East Coast again meant that I was closer to the ski resorts, and it was just a 4-hour drive to the ski resort. I couldn't compare the East Coast resorts to places like Colorado, but the place was fun. After years of day trips to the Outer Banks, I finally thought about day trips to Wintergreen. Wintergreen was the resort that was the closest to Virginia Beach. Well, we would wake up early to get to the resort around noon, then snowboard till 4 o'clock, and then drive home. No motel stays, just food and gas. The resort sold half-day tickets, so that fit us just fine. I usually could ride every trail 3 times in about 4 hours. When I first started snowboarding, winters were longer on the East Coast. We had more snow back then, and the resorts would open almost all of their trails. Now they're struggling to open half of them. I used to have dreams about driving to the resort and finding all the snow melted. We made several trips to West Virginia, usually because they had more snow than our local resort in Virginia. And for Christmas of 2004, I bought a really beautiful Burton snowboard. It was a Canyon Series board with the Drake bindings. It's the board I still ride to this day. My riding skills developed very strongly, and I could go all day, every day without falling once. This was usually when bad things start happening to riders. At Silver Creek Resort in West Virginia, we rode the whole resort all day. And as the evening approached, I rode up to the snowboard park. I'm more old school, but I still love to hit the jumps. I took a couple runs down the park, hitting some medium-sized jumps, or kickers as they called them. And then I got the courage to hit this really big kicker. I locked down my bindings really snug so I would have complete control of the board. I took a couple of breaths and turned my board down the slope. You have to get a lot of speed to clear the top of the kicker, and if you don't, you could land flat, and that usually makes you fall down. As I was building up enough speed to clear the flat top part of the kicker, a snowboarder cut me off, so I had to steer off to the left of the jump. and this is not what I had planned. I had way too much speed, but off the top I flew. Up 10 feet into the air, looking down, I noticed that they didn't finish off the side of the kicker. I had nothing to land on. I had nothing to ride out my landing on either. I hit the flat, carved-out bottom hard. It totally knocked the wind out of me. I laid there unmovable, unable to move, almost unconscious, but two kids rode up to me and several minutes later and said, Mister, are you okay? I groaned and I told them I'd be all right. I rarely ever get hurt while I'm surfing. The bigger the wave, the more comfortable I feel. I work best in about 6-foot surf. My large torso can fully expand, and carving is a little bit easier for me in those size waves. I was out in Croatan one day on the northeast in a northeast storm, and the Croatan is a Virginia Beach break that's on the opposite side of the river intake as First Street is. And the Croatan side has a jetty that blocks the current, and it can get pretty heavy. I rode with the boys all day and decided to ride one in. I rode a big wave halfway to shore, and I jumped off the wave and went under the water for a second or two. And when I came up, my board caught the next wave behind me, and it came down over the falls right onto my forehead. The board split my forehead wide open. I was parked about a mile away, and it was winter, and I was wearing a full wetsuit, gloves, and boots. I walked for about half a mile up the beach, grabbed my towel, and walked through the dunes and the dune pass that went between the two houses. I already lost a lot of blood just walking that far, and I was feeling lightheaded and dizzy. The hand that I was using to hold my broken head together was I placed on the white stucco wall of the fence and left a huge red handprint on the wall. A surfer behind me said, "Whoa, that's really gnarly, brother." I kept walking to my van, and by now I've lost even more blood. Dizzy and disoriented, I made it to my van. I called Maria to tell her to come get me because I'm hurt. I cracked my forehead open, but she was in a meeting at work and I could not reach her. So I hopped into the van and tried to make it to the MedStop clinic. I made it halfway there and I had to pull over. I was so dizzy. After a few minutes, I felt better and drove the rest of the way. Still in my wetsuit, I jumped out of the van and made it into the clinic. They looked at me and said that was too big of a gouge for them to treat. So they said I needed to go to the hospital. I walked back to my van only to find out that I locked the keys inside. Phone in one hand, towel in the other, I finally got a hold of Maria. 16 stitches later, I was good to go. Anyway, life on the East Coast was getting better with every passing day. The locals were accepting me more and more every time I surfed with them. From an outsider's view, the boys at First Street come across as mean and selfish, but nothing can be farther from the truth. These guys became like family. We pushed each other, we encouraged each other, and deep down you wanted nothing more than to see your brother get a good wave and surf it well. The amount of awareness a surfer needs in a crowded lineup is phenomenal. Sometimes there will be at least 10 guys trying to catch the same wave. Sometimes you would just catch or just watch as a set of 3 waves rolled in and everybody tried to catch the first wave. If I had the best slot, I would go for it. If not, then I would watch for the second or the third wave. 80% of the time it worked, and I would score a wave all to myself. One of the really great surfers that I admire was this fellow named Wes Lane. Wes usually caught the best waves every time he came out. This guy could sit on the outside with all the longboarders, on his shortboard, I would say, and catch waves before most of them. I watched his technique, and before long, I was starting to grasp how he pulled it off. One day, the waves were really good at 3 to 4 feet, and we were battling for a wave. And out of the blue, he just said to me, he said, "You take it." He says he gave me the wave even though he had a better slot, and I was getting a really good surf education surfing with those boys at First Street. One day I met Lane Beachley, a female world champion from Australia. While she was visiting the beach, I saw her hop out of a van at First Street and check out the surf. I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, you're Lane Beachley, aren't you?" She responded, "Why, yes, I am, mate. What's your name, mate?" I said, "I'm Doug." She said, "Do you surf, mate?" I said, "I sure do." She then asked me if I wanted to go out with her, and I said, "Oh, hell yeah." So we paddled out in the lineup and caught a wave after wave. The girl was really good, and she was really good at linking up the sections and riding the waves all the way to shore. I usually kick out halfway to the shore so I wouldn't have to fight the whitewater so much when paddling back out. I wasn't, trained for competitions. I just enjoyed riding the waves. The forecast for waves one summer's weekend was looking really great. 5 foot plus barrels on Hatteras Island. I woke up early and drove 2 hours so I could arrive at the Outer Banks by 8 a.m. When I initially pulled up to the first spot on the waves were going off. I turned to go back to the truck, and the Quicksilver bus passed me by. Quicksilver is a company that is worldly renowned as one of the surf industry's top companies, and Kelly Slater was one of their top surfers. The bus was painted with Quicksilver all over it. I drove to the next spot, and the bus had pulled up in to check out the surf as well. And 2 guys my age hopped out of it and we watched the waves together. And after a small debate, we all decided to stay at this spot and avoid the crowd. The waves were really, really pumping. Barrel after barrel, I surfed with these 2 older guys for a couple hours before they went in. Then I surfed another couple hours with another young man, and I stopped for lunch, then jumped back in the water for one last session. That's when these 3 young guys started surfing in the cove right next to me. I saw them walking up the beach towards me, and they picked a spot just a little bit south of where I was. So myself and the other young man, we were in one little cove surfing, and then these 3 other guys got jumped in and ride the cove right next to us. Anyway, as I watched them surf, I said to myself, wow, these guys are really good. I thought they were North Carolina locals or something, because those guys are really, really good surfers too. Eventually, I paddled over to where they were surfing, and we swapped waves for about an hour until I ran out of steam. These guys were the best surfers I'd ever surfed with. I mean, they could launch themselves 10 feet in the air on a chest-high wave. The best I could do is about a 2-foot air, and I thought that was something spectacular. One fellow who looked a couple of years older than the other two guys was able to take off under the lip of a barreling wave. I was just amazed by how he could fit his frame and his torso and tuck it in so small and get under these waves as they're on the takeoff as it's barreling over. I couldn't take off on another wave. I was all surfed out. I packed up my board and headed back to Nag's Head. And as I drove into town, I stopped in at the Whalebone Surf Shop. And to my amazement, there were the 3 window-sized posters of the 3 guys I had just surfed with and just left at the beach. It was Dane Reynolds, Julian Wilson, and Clay Marzo, 3 of the world's best young surfers. They were on the Young Guns tour. I felt so honored to have surfed with these guys that day. And I have kept up with their careers, and every time I see them in a concert or in a video, I am reminded of that wonderful day back on the Outer Banks. It's a 3-hour drive from my house to the Hatteras Lighthouse, and sometimes when the wind is blowing southwest, Virginia Beach can be full of crappy 3-foot crumbly waves. At times, the trip to the lighthouse in Hatteras is worth the drive. One fall I drove down, and when I pulled up to the spot where the lighthouse used to sit, the surf was big and heavy. I had never seen anything like this. The waves were huge, about 15 to 20 foot faces. And the weird part was that they were not coming straight to the beach. The current made them turn sideways a little bit. They were completely perpendicular to the beach. The foam bounce from the crashing lip was over 20 feet high, and I sat there watching these massive waves rolling straight south. Many surfers showed up, but not one of them could make it out. Duck dive or not, you just couldn't get past these huge mountains of white water. Then this fellow with a kiteboard showed up, and he put his rig together and launched his kite, and the kite pulled him up and over the massive walls. He would ride out to sea, hit a wave, then fly up another 40 feet above the wave, and then spin right down and come back down and catch the wave behind it. Then the guy would pull into 20-foot barrels, and the kite would pull him in the direction of the barrel, and he would get totally covered up with his lines poking right through the water, and then he'd pull through his lines and pull himself out of the barrel and fly up in the air again. And if he got closed out and caught inside of a barrel with no way out, the wave would eat him up. But the next thing you knew, the kite would catch air, reinflate, and pull him out from underneath the closed out wave. After watching this fellow pull off many amazing maneuvers, both in and above the ocean, I made a trip to the local store. I bought a couple of energy drinks. I downed them both and went back to the lighthouse. I sat there and watched surfer after surfer get skunked trying to get out. No one could make it out. Then I noticed a small lull between the couple of waves. I grabbed my board and two younger fellows followed me out. We managed to bust through the massive whitewater. The whitewater occurs when the barreling wave smashes down on the water surface. This day, the whitewater bounce went back up over 20 feet in the air. That's when I knew I was in over my head. We had made it out and busted out past all the whitewater and got in position. But the waves were really large, probably the largest surf I'd ever surfed in North Carolina. And a big 15-footer came right at me. I turned and I caught it. And it was so massive and so beautiful, a right-hander that peeled cleanly all the way down the beach. When I took off paddling for this wave, there was no hesitation. This was my wave. I dropped down in the face and bottom turned so beautifully. I was going so fast that I could feel my board skipping through the wave's surface as I rode down the face. I made the board stall by putting on the brakes, and I was trying to do my best to get this massive wave to barrel over me, but I was going way too fast. I was going so fast that my hand could not penetrate the wave's surface to caress the water. Getting to shore was very difficult also. My timing had to be perfect or I was going to get hammered. The waves usually come in sets of 2 or 3 or more, and this usually is a short window between the sets of waves. If you timed your entry to the shore, you could get in between the sets and paddle your ass off to make it without getting a wave crashing down on your head. The waves crashing down on the shore break were about 5 to 7 feet tall that day. I mean, it was massive. I made it to shore, and I realized that lucky to have lived and caught just that one wave. It was 6 hours of driving and only one wave, and there was no way I could paddle back out. So it was worth the 6-hour drive. For sure, my friends, it sure was. My wife and I have always dreamt about going to Oregon, so one year we planned a trip to visit Portland and the coastline. It was mid-October, and we flew from Norfolk to Portland. Our flight took off just as the sun was rising on the East Coast, and I thought it'd be really cool if we could watch the sun rise on the East Coast and then watch it set on the West Coast, all in the same day. When we landed in Portland, we dropped off our stuff at the hotel and drove to the shore. We pulled up to the beach town of Lincoln and caught sight of 40-foot waves. That was amazing. I had never seen waves that big in my life. I didn't bring a board with me on this trip, but I did bring all my wetsuit attire. And the next day we returned to the beach, and the waves were now only 20 feet tall. We stopped into a local surf shop to see if we could rent a board. Only soft-top boards were available for rentals, and those were not the kind of boards that I could take out into any serious surf. So I waited for the shop owner to get free from his tourists renting soft-top boards and told him I was from Virginia Beach, and did he have a real surfboard that I could rent. He pulled me into the back of his shop and pulled out a 9-foot-long Gary Linden board. I gave the cashier my credit card and information and loaded up the truck. Then I thought to ask, was there any place that had a little bit of shelter? I mean, these waves are massive. So any shelter from the wind and the massive waves that were in front of the surf shop. She was hesitant at first, but soon she realized that I was serious about surfing or scoring some manageable waves. She told me how to get to this place called the Cove. The Cove was in the next little town to the north, so we drove up and found it. When we pulled up, it was going off 6 to 10 foot tall waves tucked into this nice hidden cove. It was mostly left-hand breaks, with an occasional right-hand beauty coming through. I paddled out, all rubbered up, and on the rental board I had never ridden, and I caught 3 nice right-hand 6-foot waves. Then this massive 10-footer came my way, and it just felt like everything fell into place. And I took off going left. And the left is my backside. I'm a regular footer. And and I'm a little weak on my backside. I didn't care, but I was going for it. And as I dropped into this wave, I realized it was the biggest left that I'd ever caught in my mind. It was a scene from the cartoon movie Surf's Up, where Zeke, the older penguin, told Cody, the younger penguin, "In big waves, just remember, smooth, easy turns. Smooth, easy turns." This linden board had some magic in it. I soared across the wave surface so beautifully, and I pulled off the back of the wave as it drew closer to the shore, and I was so impressed by this board. After that wave, that place seemed to shut down. The waves were still big, but not manageable. Getting out into the water without killing myself or damaging the board was tough. The cove was lined with rounded rocks, and they were very slippery. With little grace, I managed to get to the shore without damaging the board or myself. And when I dropped off the board to the shop owner pulled the board out of its bag, inspected it, and asked me if I caught any waves. I had told him about the left that I caught, and I could tell that that's what he wanted to hear, how I caught some beautiful waves and returned the board without a scratch on it. Maria and I stopped into a local grocery store, and while checking out at the register, we overheard the cashier tone a local surfer and asking him if he was going surfing. The surfer responded, No, it's kind of small." Maria and I looked at each other like we had the same question mark on our face. What does he mean by small? These are some of the biggest waves I'd ever caught. Being mid-October, Mount Hood Ski Resort was open, and we had snowboard attire but no snowboards. We thought we might be able to rent a couple of boards at the resort. So we drove from Portland to Mount Hood, and as we were driving, the wind started picking up. And by the time we reached the summit, where the lodge is, the wind was really strong, so strong that we could not open the passenger car door. We had to both climb out of the driver's side door, and we got sandblasted as the winds picked up to every particle of dirt and threw it right into our faces. The winds were steady 60 miles an hour, gusting to 80. So we huffed it and made it into the ski lodge, only to find out the resort was closed due to the high winds. I would have figured that, but anyway, it was worth the trip up there. And it would have been nice to snowboard in October, but it wasn't going to happen on this trip. We lived simple lives back in Virginia Beach in our 3-bedroom house. Maria and I each had a room of our own. I had a beautiful meditation room, and Maria had a small but adequate painting room. I started collecting every book I could find on spiritual subjects. Sometimes I would pop into Maria's painting room to see her progress and look at her paintings. Then one day I was reading about Zen and art, and I read this story. So I'd like to share it with you. And the story goes, in China there was a very wealthy man who loved the Himalayas, and he wanted a mural painted on his bedroom wall. He wanted a picture of the Himalayas to remind him of the beautiful mountains that took his breath away. The wealthy man searched for an artist that could paint this picture for him. While asking around the villages, he heard of an artist who was supposed to be the best artist in all of China. The people of the village told the wealthy man that he could find this artist in the woods, and warned him, though, the wealthy man, that he was a little eccentric. The wealthy man found the artist and asked him if he could paint a mural in his house that would remind him of the beautiful Himalayas that he loved so much. He told him, "You name your price. I hear you are the very best, and I will pay anything you want." The artist agreed to paint the mural, but under one condition, that he must be paid in advance, and he must go to the Himalayas and meditate. And when he finished meditating, he would come back and then paint the mural. The wealthy man agreed and paid the artist, and the artist then packed up his belongings and headed to the Himalayas. The wealthy man returned home and waited for the artist to come to paint his mural. 1 year had passed, and still the artist never showed. 2 years passed, and he still did not show. Finally, after 3 years, the artist showed up at the wealthy man's house, and upon his arrival, the wealthy man asked him where he had been and why he had been gone for so long. The artist said he had to go to the Himalayas and meditate. He had to see and feel what the wealthy man wanted him to paint. The artist put up a huge tarp to hide the wall on which he was to paint, and he painted for weeks, keeping the mural hidden from sight. And when he finished, he pulled the tarp off the painting, and the wealthy man's mouth dropped. Tears came to his eyes. The artist truly captured the Himalayas in his mural. And as the wealthy man admired the painting, he noticed a trail winding up the mountain. Then, disappearing off behind the mountain, he asked the artist, "Where did that trail lead?" The artist responded, "I don't know. Let me find out." And he walked into the painting and walked down that trail and disappeared in the trail, never to be seen again. I told Maria that she needed to disappear into her paintings, bring Zen into her art, stay ahead of the mind, and dive into your art so that there is no artist, it's just painting. I would go into my meditation room, and for the first few minutes I would channel energy into Maria, and then we would both disappear. I would disappear into my meditation, and Maria disappeared into her art. One day I met a fellow meditator who ran a small meditation group in Virginia Beach. Her name was Georgia. I was excited to meditate with other people. I had never meditated in a group before. And after meditating with this group for months, I wanted to share my light with Georgia. So we went out to dinner one night, and after meditating, and I told her that I was enlightened. And she did not say anything back to me about what I had told her until weeks later. Then she asked me, "How is it that you are enlightened, and all these priests and monks who have dedicated their lives to becoming enlightened have not become enlightened?" And at the time, I could not answer her. I mean, how am I supposed to know why someone else is not enlightened? It seemed to hurt her when I shared my secret with her. After this, I just kept this secret with me for years, not telling anyone. Then one day, I met a distant relative of Maria's by chance at a sandwich shop, and that's when she asked me out of the blue if I was enlightened. She said, "I could tell there was something about you, something that's different." And then she asked me if God existed. She said she just wanted to know. And this put me into an awkward place because if I simply said yes, that would hinder her search towards her own spiritual enlightenment. I could not say no to her, so I told her that it's more than you could ever imagine. Enlightenment is when you are the drop of water, and that drop of water has left the ocean, formed again into a raindrop, and then found its way through rivers and streams and finally returns to the sea. It is the biggest mystery of how a drop of water can know what the whole ocean is just from one taste. It could be said that the whole ocean and the drop of water have traded places. As I told this relative about enlightenment, it then came to me that if a raindrop formed over the sea, then its journey back to the sea would be shorter than the journey of that drop formed over the land. Maybe that's why my journey towards enlightenment was shorter than the priest that my friend Georgia had asked me about. Enlightenment does not mean that you have all the answers to all of life's questions or mysteries. What's more true is that your questions drop the moment you and God merge. Now, trying to explain to another person how to get to that point where your own life has gone is another matter. I think that's why I spend so much time reading spiritual work from other enlightened people that came before me. Maria and I made several trips to New York City for her art shows and Philadelphia and all kinds of places. But I think my favorite was New York City, and that's when I first met this lady named Satya Priya. Satya Priya is a sannyasin of the Indian mystic Osho, and she was the first sannyasin that I had the pleasure of meeting. Priya sold used Osho books at a very good price, and I would ride my 5-foot-long skateboard 4 miles in South Soho just to get to her apartment down in Soho. I brought about 25 books every time I visited her, I think. She got a kick out of me filling up 2 or 3 big plastic bags full of books and skateboarding 4 miles back to the art show. I loved talking to her. She has such a beautiful soul. And she told me all these stories of how she lived in Osho's commune in India and in Oregon. Satya has also conducted Osho's active meditations. And I could never make it to any of her meditations because the art show finished long after her meditations were over. They did spark a curiosity, so one night Maria and I made it over to her house just after her meditation ended. There was this group of about 12 people, 12 meditators, and they invited us out for dinner. They invited us out for dinner, and one of the young Indian ladies that was a meditator asked me if I had ever done any of Osho's meditations. My answer was no, I just surf. I told her that, to me, surfing is the most powerful meditation in the world. I told her that when I am out surfing in the early mornings, it is pure Zen. Nobody talks in the water. We just enjoy the silent moments waiting for the next beautiful wave to come our way. Also, the salt water cleanses your aura. When a surfer hits the water, he or she leaves everything back on land behind him. We don't think about sharks or any of the other dangers when we're out. When we just expose ourselves to the elements. We just sit there and enjoy the serenity of the moment. After I told her that she could not wait to give surfing a try. Then she told me about some of Osho's meditations and how they cathart negative energy and how they would build positive energy. I really wanted to try some of the meditations she told me about, but it was just not possible in New York City. We had the art shows to do every time. Finally, I found a young man conducting the meditations in Virginia Beach. I was completely floored by how these meditations changed my energy levels. I thought I was spiritually rich before I practiced them. I thought I had plenty of diamonds, but now my life was so much more rich. Now I am finding out that there is no end to how rich the soul can become. Practicing active meditations with the eyes of awareness is so beautiful. We stayed in Virginia Beach in our comfortable house for 11 years. I collected several hundred books on every spiritual subject that had God's light in it. And then we decided one day to move back to Texas. We decided that, and we realized that we could live mortgage-free if we moved back. And I was missing Texas surf, and I wanted to be closer to my family. And Houston also has a world-class skydiving drop zone. So I was ready to move back to Texas after 11 years in Virginia Beach. I loved and sincerely miss every person that I left in Virginia Beach. They were my family, my Aikido family with Jim's dojo, my surfing friends. I mean, there's a bond that's created, between you and your surfing brothers that's stronger than any bond out there. I mean, you guys are like American Indians who share tribal emotions, and you were the braves out there braving the elements and enjoying nature in its wildest moments. No fear of anything, no thoughts, just complete, like I said, like it's a Zen experience that only a surfer knows the feeling. Anyway, that's the end of chapter 5. Thank you again for joining me. You guys take care of yourselves. We'll pick up with chapter 6 as soon as I can get right back to it. Take care of yourselves out there, and love often. Bye.